So before I get into this video, I want to let you know that there is new content up on my second channel. So if you're interested in seeing a sneak peek into my life, or you're interested in dialogue about femininity, primarily for Black women, go subscribe, enjoy the videos. There's much more to come, and the link is in the description box. So I decided that since concepts and terms that I popularized on this platform in spaces for Black women, one specifically being corrective promotion, since I am being brought up yet again by Black feminist detractors in their critique of Black women in luxury and Black femininity and hypergamy platforms, I decided to make this podcast style video to address some things that were said. And I've only done one other podcast style video. I'll probably start doing more of them in the future because honestly, they're less time consuming and to me, they're good for longer videos. And I may keep doing videos on this topic and just about the very visceral and many times irrational response to certain images or promotion of Black women, because it's really fascinating to me. I could talk about it forever. And I just think it's a really good case study for a lot of what I discuss on my channel. So I may just make this into a little series. I'm not sure, but I may do that. So let's jump right in. I first want to address how the Black woman in luxury and femininity discourse detractors are, in my opinion, intentionally conflating different ideologies that would be mostly categorized under BWE or Black woman empowerment. And although some of the messaging can overlap, everything we talk about in BWE spaces, whether it be femininity, hypergamy, divestment, swirling, or even Black women in luxury, they are all different ideologies for Black women. I do think all of them are closely related. One or two can complement the other or help with the other, but you don't need to be feminine or luxurious to be divested, for example. You don't need to be luxurious or divested to swirl. And I do think that the detractors who are listening and responding in bad faith are intentionally conflating all of these platforms because the distinctions have been made on several channels. I've made the distinctions on my channel, and I just don't believe that they don't know the difference. But for those of you who genuinely did not know, I hope now you have a better understanding. I don't have a Black woman in luxury platform. I do live well, but I'm not rich or wealthy, and I've never claimed to be. I also don't consider myself divested, but I do endorse both divestment and luxury for Black women for their personal lives and promotionally as well. I'm more so a channel that focuses on corrective promotion, hypergamy or dating up, and femininity for dark-skinned Black women. That is my lane. And I'm also not trying to gatekeep any of these topics or send the message that they are above reproach. I definitely think they all have their flaws and they can certainly be critiqued. However, when someone intentionally misrepresents my concepts or ties them to certain people in an attempt to paint a narrative about my platform that isn't true, that is when I have a problem and I have to address it. And most recently, my concept of corrective promotion was associated with a divester on Twitter who has me blocked, by the way, for whatever reason. I don't know why she has me blocked, but this is clearly a person, from what I can tell, who does not like me. But she is being used by certain people to paint the picture that this is how all or most of my audience thinks, or how most women think in this space in general. And I believe it's being done intentionally to discredit me, my platform, and misrepresent the intention behind my platform. And I like a few divestment platforms, so I'm not trying to, paint them with a broad brush either. But there are divestors that I think are a little bit extreme, that I don't like, that don't like me, and that's fine. And what I see happening is that people who don't like me are taking a few what I consider to be half-baked posts on Twitter, and they're basing their arguments around them instead of going to the source, coming to the source, and just a larger community of level-headed Black women in BWE and basing their responses on that. Because I don't see the primary Black femininity and hypergamy influencers calling Black men bullet bags or apes or calling to abort Black male babies. I don't see that happening over here. Now, does an intersection exist? Yes, but that happens with other spaces as well. There's also an overlap present with us and Black feminists. We have some of the same goals for Black women, but we are clearly different and the distinction is made. So I just ask that people stop being disingenuous, make the distinction between groups when you are addressing these topics. If your arguments are strong enough, you don't have to paint a false narrative. And I believe that them refusing to make the distinction between groups in BWE is done intentionally because it's easier to poke holes and support your narrative when you skip the source and you pluck out the extremists who may parrot femininity and hypergamy and corrective promotion talking points, but don't align completely with the mission. And even Black feminists have those extremists in their group. They stay up in my comment section, so I know that they exist. But what I don't do is use those people to misrepresent my detractors and what they say simply because I don't like them or don't fully agree with their politics. And I agree with their arguments against the divestors on Twitter. I don't think misgendering Black feminist is useful, and I don't see women who genuinely stand for what I stand for doing that. We don't make fun of women for not having a man or not being married. We don't condone calling Black women we don't agree with ugly. I said this about OG from Basketball Wives when Black women were calling her ugly all over the internet. That's something I don't agree with, and those who really rock with me know that. I don't negatively mention other Black women's looks who disagree with me. I focus strictly on their talking points. And just an FYI, I've never said that my detractors and their audiences don't fit my definition of femininity or beauty. And it's not that I feel so important that I think that they should want to fit in, but I do see that sometimes. They'll say things like, oh, well, we don't fit in over there. And I don't believe that to be true. Some of you just believe that about yourselves, and that's unfortunate. But many of those women, they look like me. They look like the women who follow me. I've promoted women who look like them, who look like us on Divine Dark Skin. And I think the majority of Black women over here in my space would not say that those women were ugly or don't fit in. So again, they themselves either don't feel like they measure up because of their own conditioning, or either they're basing their feelings around BWE extremists on Twitter who adopted the term corrective promotion, and they're not basing their opinions on the actual majority of women who endorse corrective promotion. And I just don't understand that, because when I address groups of people, I address what the majority of them are saying. I don't use anomalies to disingenuously paint a whole narrative about a concept that those people did not create. And when I point out that my detractors are doing this, they will then lie about not watching my content. And then it immediately goes into, oh, well, I don't watch faceless YouTubers. And it's like, how don't you watch my content, but you're creating whole video essays on terms that I popularized in online spaces for Black women? Look, some of you have got to stop lying and saying you don't watch Chrissie. You're constantly addressing my specific talking points in your think pieces and your comments and your video essays. And I know some of you hate to admit that you listen to a quote unquote avatar because me being anonymous is something you don't respect, but it's clear that you listen to me and you will likely continue to do so. You're either a fan or you're a hate watcher. We see you, and it's okay, sis. You don't have to say names, but we know whose content and concepts you're referring to. And I won't say names either to keep from being too messy, but I can at least admit that I listen to the content. I don't pretend not to hear what they say and then respond to them through one of their messy followers and, deliberately misconstrue their message. I don't do that. I don't need to do that. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the actual arguments that were made against my concept of corrective promotion for Black women. And let me say that if you're going to analyze the concept of corrective promotion, a concept, again, that I popularized in this space, please don't misrepresent it or get it wrong. Get it right. Because I know you know what it is, but y'all know I love to beat a dead horse. So I'll tell y'all again, for those of you who really don't know. The idea of corrective promotion for Black women is to add more variety to the current promotion that exists. The current promotion that exists, meaning the consistent, always viral, hypersexualized imagery of Black women. Also, the struggle love promotion of Black women and constant Black woman warrior promotion, fighting on the front line, and or the mammy trope. Now, with that being said, not once when encouraging corrective promotion Have I ever said that activist Black women, poor Black women, sexual Black women, fat Black women, trans Black women should not be represented at all? I've stated the exact opposite. And either the detractors are not listening or flat out lying about not hearing me say that. We already said that all Black women deserve to be promoted and deserve to be treated with respect. But we also believe in the idea of corrective promotion, and both can exist simultaneously. Again, the idea of corrective promotion is to add and create more balance, not necessarily take everything away. And for the Black women who say they quote unquote don't care about corrective promotion, if you truly don't care, that's fine. But the problem is most of you Black feminists saying you don't care actually do care about corrective promotion, which is a huge reason why you have your platforms for Black women. If you care about how your image is depicted as a Black woman, you do care about how other people see you. And yes, even white people. And I know some Black women, y'all like to believe that we only want representation in the media for ourselves, but it's also because you want to be seen by other people. You also care how others may or may not treat you based on promotion. All of that comes with caring about promotion. You don't get to deny certain elements of that because they make you uncomfortable or because it's too close to respectability for your liking. Let's just keep it a buck. You, me, we all want to feel seen by others via the media. If you complain about the erasure of Black women, then yes, you care about corrective promotion. You may not be calling it that, but you care. If you see biracial women or white women being represented one way and Black women are represented in another way, and that bothers you as a Black woman, which it obviously does if you've been talking about it on your platform for a decade, that means you care. If you care about the complexion of a love interest in a film marketed to Black women, if you care that Black women are underrepresented or misrepresented in a magazine, that means you care about the ways in which Black women are promoted in comparison to non-Black women. Black women in these conversations, we all want more equality in promotion. We desire the same opportunities and promotion that non-Black women get, and that goes for both biracial women and white women. Let's call a thing a thing. Let's not lie about it. If you didn't want more promotional equality, you wouldn't have think pieces and video essays about that inequality. They wouldn't exist. If you didn't care, you wouldn't complain about limited promotion for Black women. None of that would matter if you didn't care how people saw you. Wanting to be validated by other people is a natural human condition. So you can go on and on about how corrective promotion is respectability politics, but when you peel back all of the layers, you actually agree with it too. You're just not being honest about it. Or maybe you're just unaware of your desire for it, or unaware of where the human desire for promotion and representation comes from. And one thing I'm not about to do on my platform is lie. I do care, which is why I push for corrective promotion. So now that we've established that all of us here in these spaces care about corrective promotion, I'm sure we can agree that wanting more equality in promotion as Black women doesn't always mean that we want to be white or biracial, or mean that we want to have white or light skin. It doesn't mean that we necessarily want to see Eurocentric images of ourselves. Me personally, yes, I want more visibility for unambiguous dark-skinned Black women, but I want them to look like self-loving Black women. I also want to see more Black women being financially comfortable and in healthy, loving, functional relationships as opposed to struggle love, because we don't get enough of that in comparison to our other promotion. And wanting to see that also isn't wanting to be quote unquote white or Eurocentric promotion, because being promoted in healthy, loving, functional relationships isn't a quote unquote white woman thing. And if it is, that's something we should want to change, both in reality and through promotion. And yes, as long as other groups of women can have promotion of them at their very best, living their best lives, we can have more of that too. Again, not to say that we can't be promoted having flaws. We can have both. But right now it's a little too lopsided, and that's really not debatable. And so I'm going to push for corrective promotion because, again, that's what all of us want, even if we're not honest about it. I can be honest and also say that white supremacy and the ways in which they promote white women and biracial women versus Black women is the reason corrective promotion exists. That's never been denied by me. But that's also why other platforms, including the platforms that my detractors have, that is why their platforms exist as well, which again is why they too care about corrective promotion. So now I want to address the argument that exclusive spaces for Black women like mine who focus on corrective promotion, or Black women who identify with traditional femininity, are quote unquote violent and phobic. And I'm going to keep saying this, but you cannot have exclusive spaces for Black women that identify with traditional femininity and prioritize specific issues pertaining to traditionally feminine Black women without excluding someone. It's impossible. And primarily because, like you guys always say, Black women are not a monolith. We don't all relate to each other. And as we can see with so much pushback from the detractors, many do not relate to spaces like this, so there should not be an issue. And this is why, especially in 2022, I plan to make my platform even more niche for dark-skinned women, because a lot of dark-skinned women just don't relate to this, and that's cool with me now. And because we see that Black women and our plight is consistently being drowned out in spaces that are supposed to prioritize them, but because they're so inclusive, they can't really prioritize them like they should, we simply cannot have spaces that primarily address our unique issues without making them exclusive to us. If we could realistically have one space that focuses equally on everybody's plight, like every single Black woman that exists, that would already have happened. But as we can see, multiple platforms for Black women have been created, different factions exist, and that is because they felt like they weren't being prioritized in other spaces. So having various spaces for Black women that cater to different interests, that is just inevitable. And as far as excluding masculine Black women, they have always been welcomed here, but this is a space for Black women interested in traditional femininity and the promotion of that. If you're a masculine Black woman who is a tomboy or a stud, for example, and you enjoy being masculine, then you wouldn't enjoy my space or other similar spaces. That's what spaces for masculine Black women are for, to promote masculine Black women and have an outlet for their plight. And I've seen their spaces. They have their spaces and we have ours. So again, what is the issue? I'm not attempting to hijack their spaces as a traditionally feminine Black woman and demand that they represent me because I'm not included. The space is just not for me, and that's okay. And it says a lot that only feminine Black women aren't allowed to have an interest group or a space exclusive to us, but everyone else is allowed to have one. I have a problem with that, and I'm going to keep calling it out as long as the detractors keep trying to force inclusivity onto us and literally no one else. Now, as far as my space and other similar spaces being quote unquote fat phobic, you simply cannot help Black women become healthier and lose weight without calling a thing a thing. We have to encourage weight loss. We have to share tips on weight loss. We have to promote healthy Black women. And listen, as a Black woman who lost nearly 80 pounds and feels so much better, is physically healthier, lab work has immensely improved due to weight loss, you just can't tell me that losing weight and adopting a healthier lifestyle for most women won't physically make them healthier. I live it, so I know. So if helping Black women become healthier and the best version of themselves and prioritizing ourselves is what some of the feminists are referring to as violence and fat phobia, then that's where we just have to go our separate ways. If having a platform that encourages Black women to date as far up as they can and discouraging them from having babies with low value men who don't marry them, if that's classist, oh well. I'm not going to promote a lifestyle or a relationship dynamic that has statistically been proven to be harmful to Black women in the name of classism. I'm just not doing it. If trans women can have spaces that prioritize their plight, but having a space that prioritizes my plight as a biological Black woman is transphobic or violent towards trans women, that's where we have to disagree. I've never said that trans women don't deserve to be promoted, don't deserve to exist, don't deserve basic rights, don't deserve their own spaces. I've never said that they can't use the advice or benefit from what we say over here. But this particular platform is primarily for biological Black women. And I've discussed all the reasons why in my videos about trans women, why a separate space, at least one, is necessary. This doesn't mean that I think that all platforms for Black women shouldn't include the trans woman's plight. But this one primarily focuses on ours, like they have platforms and organizations that focus on theirs. There are several spaces for Black women that don't include all Black women, and this is just one of them. You cannot force inclusivity on just one group of Black women when we need our issues addressed exclusively as well. And if you don't feel the space is necessary or it's not beneficial to you, simply don't partake in it. But as Black women who wish to make decisions that are in our best interest, we cannot operate on the do as little harm as possible mantra in our spaces. Why? Because it ultimately means sacrificing ourselves, because other groups are not operating that way. They're not operating by that mantra, not white people, not Black men, and no, not even the LGBT. And I'm well aware that there's an intersection there, but even gay people put issues that are specific to gay people above issues that are specific to Black people or Blackness. and black women. That's what the LGBT movement does. Blackness and black womanhood is not prioritized in that movement. And so because everyone prioritizes their issues in their spaces, we're going to do the same. If that's not what you choose to do in your space, fine. But you're not going to stop us from doing it. And you call us sick for prioritizing us in our spaces, but I call you sick for not doing it because everyone else you're caping for does it. Black women intentionally deciding to be sacrificial lambs and fight for people with little to no reciprocity is a sickness. And another argument I want to address is that femininity advice or femininity platforms are only for black women who have a lot of money. I don't know where this came from. I mean, at this point, I feel like this is why I say that some of the response is irrational, because where did this come from? I feel like this was made up, or maybe they're, again, conflating the black woman in luxury discourse with the femininity discourse. But I have not heard anyone say who has a femininity platform for black women that you have to have a lot of money to be feminine. And I'm trying to figure out how women who on average have money for lace fronts, money for weave, money for acrylic nails, suddenly in these conversations want to pretend that most black women are too poor to afford feminine enhancements. And if we're talking about how black women who live in poverty or black women who live in the hood don't exist in environments that allow their femininity to flourish, and they have to be tough and masculine to protect themselves and to survive, leave the mustard and ketchup, sis. That has been a conversation in black femininity spaces since day one. And this is why I say, y'all, they're trolling. They have to be trolling because you can't be this uninformed when you talking so strong. Please do your research before attempting to deconstruct our arguments. We've been giving femininity advice to women in the hood and just advice in general that could potentially put them in a better environment. We're helping them navigate those environments. We've already talked about how dangerous it is for black women, specifically in New York. We've given them tips on self-defense. We've said that you can't always be soft and feminine when protecting yourself. And this is why I always say my platform has never been about black women being inherently masculine. It's about helping them tap into their femininity that they've been robbed of. We also say that there's both femininity and masculinity in every woman, and having balance is okay. We've said all of that. You are late to the party. And even still, everything I just said does not change that black women as a collective are spending billions a year on weave and lace fronts. So on average, most black women can afford to take the femininity advice that we give. Ladies, just say that you don't want to take the advice. Just say that you don't like the femininity discourse. Don't start making shit up or making weak arguments about how most black women don't have access when statistically that just does not add up. Don't start exaggerating about how we're saying that black women have to be super rich and wealthy to fit in the femininity club, because if you do your research, which is all over the internet, you can find that that is not true. So it begins to look like you're just lying or exaggerating because you have an agenda. Most black women fit in over here. They are capable of taking the advice. And most black women, I think we make around $40,000 a year. So most of us have access to everything we're encouraging. It doesn't require a lot of money to enhance or embrace your femininity. Now, obviously, it does cost to practice most of the self-care that we promote. However, you can do that on a budget. And again, I'm trying to figure out what femininity platform that's targeting black women does not say that. A lot of them are always talking about ways to save money and get discounts and get out of debt. So I'm like, where are they saying or insinuating that you have to be rich to be feminine? I just want y'all to point me to a femininity content creator that's pushing the idea that femininity requires luxury or a ton of money to spend on luxury to be feminine or to be accepted in femininity spaces. I'll wait. So another popular ongoing argument about spaces like mine is that we believe black women embracing femininity will end racism, or end racism specifically for black women who practice femininity or who enhance their femininity or embrace it. And a common example that they like to use is Michelle Obama. Why? Because she is a traditionally feminine black woman who still experiences racism by the larger society, by white people. And of course, she still experiences racism by white society. But why are we defining Michelle Obama's entire life experience solely based on how she was treated by white people? And it's interesting how some of the same black feminists who hate our platforms and who accuse us of caring too much about what white people think can look at the abundance and fullness of Michelle Obama's life and only focus on how racist white people treated her, or they want us to only focus on that. And I did read Becoming. I know Michelle Obama is affected by racism. I know she cares about it. I know she's very aware of it. But y'all care more about her experience with racism than she seems to care about it. Is she giving up or objecting to her lifestyle or her traditional femininity in the name of racism and classism? No. Not to mention she appears to be thriving today, her and her family. Yet you want us to ignore that. You want us to skip over all of that and focus on her struggles. And I know y'all don't like it, but this is why people keep saying that y'all only feel comfortable seeing black women struggle. Even when they're not struggling as much as you make them out to be, that is how you seemingly feel most comfortable seeing them promotionally and in the mainstream. Maybe not personally, but promotionally. And you claim you don't, but then you say things that give the impression that you do. And look, we can acknowledge racism, we can fight against it, but it doesn't have to consume every single space for black women. I experience racism too. I experience colorism too, but I still live a great life. Now, am I telling black women to only be satisfied with a life where, yeah, you may live well, but you still have to endure racism and colorism? Am I telling you to be satisfied with that life and not want anything more? Absolutely not, if you don't want to. But let's stop discouraging black women from using certain things that can potentially help them individually despite of racism. These platforms, these spaces are not going to cease to exist because you say so, or because they aren't feminist enough for you, or because they're not focusing enough on the black women that you want us to focus on. You don't dictate what we do over here. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of this pushback about our spaces or other spaces similar to ours, it appears to be concern trolling in my opinion, especially with black women in luxury. Because I'm listening to some of the complaints and I'm like, how many black women are truly losing themselves in this aesthetic? Because in the luxury groups that I'm in, which I'm in one of the biggest groups, if not, I think it is the biggest group, I see constant conversations about getting rid of debt and managing finances. I see comments all the time from black women. Oh, don't go into debt for luxury. Don't live outside of your means. Here's a dupe for this. Here's a dupe for that. It's less expensive. Bougie on a budget. That's an actual hashtag. Most black women in these spaces, including myself, and this is from my perspective, they may want a few luxury items or go on, some luxury vacations here and there. But overall, they just want to be comfortable. I see that a lot too. Luxury to me is debt free. Like it's always, luxury to me. This is what I define as luxury. So all of this talk about going into debt to obtain luxury and black women constantly looking at black women in luxury and not thinking they're good enough or that they have enough. I know it happens, but I also think it's being grossly exaggerated. And I'm just trying to bring some balance to the discussion. Does this really apply to most black women who are into this aesthetic or following this aesthetic, or is that being projected onto them? From my perspective, I think these women just want a space where they can luxuriate and relax for a moment, escape for a moment without being consumed with race politics and everything wrong with the world and how black women are just so down bad. It's just a space where they can disconnect from that. And that brings me to the argument that the black woman in luxury aesthetic is not truly black women being carefree. And I want to touch on this because I think the idea of black women in luxury being carefree, or that statement being made by black women who endorse black women in luxury, I think that's being intentionally misconstrued with this argument. The quote unquote care that black women have about wanting to make sure we have the space to luxuriate, or the care we have when it comes to wanting corrective promotion exclusively for black women, that cannot be equalized to the care or the non-reciprocal support black women engage in through social justice warring, primarily for black men or other groups of people. And I say that because I kind of get the feeling that they're trying to compare those two. The detractors, they're saying, oh, well, you guys are calling it a movement, so it's not carefree. You care just like us. You care just like the black women activists. You're not really carefree. It's kind of like a gotcha moment, right? But it's not a gotcha moment. It's not, sis, because the two cannot be compared. One care is an investment. The other care is a sacrifice. Putting ourselves first, practicing self-care for a moment without caring about anyone else. That's all that means. Of course, it doesn't mean you don't care about anything at all, ever. Of course, I care about what kind of bag I want to buy, or what kind of shoes I want to buy, or what outfit I'm gonna, look good in the club or whatever. But that's a happy place. That doesn't feel draining to me. Being a 24/7 activist, that's draining. Unless activism, of course, is your happy place. But for a lot of Black women, including myself, we need a break from that. Luxuriating gives me that break. It doesn't matter if I'm shopping. It doesn't matter if I'm going on a vacation or going to a nice restaurant. That is how I temporarily free myself. So when we say carefree, maybe we should use a different word. I'm open to that. But when we say that, it doesn't mean that Black women can never care about anything at all, or go from slaving for racial injustice to slaving to obtain luxury or perform luxury. And I think the feminist detractors, they understand that. They're just exaggerating it to fit their narrative. That's my belief. And sure, Black women, we need to relax and not always feel the need to perform luxury or exhaust ourselves chasing the pursuit of luxury. Absolutely. Every group needs that in a capitalistic society, not just Black women. But guess what? They're still not rejecting their luxury promotion. They're still not going to reject their luxury promotion. Most of them will still accept it, even if they need a break. So my objective is to help Black women to nuance these conversations. Sure, you shouldn't allow the pursuit of luxury to consume you or take over your life, but you can also have luxury promotion and experiences. You can have both. You can do both like everyone else. You don't have to choose. You don't have to always go through these different extremes, Black women. And I feel like that is my problem with these conversations. If it's not one extreme, it's the other. And that's the problem. And you can try to paint the narrative that my platform is extreme, but it's not. You have to intentionally make it extreme to fit your narrative. And that says a lot. But yeah, Black women, you can do both. You can embrace luxury promotion without believing that it will end racism or liberate the collective of Black people or magically turn you into a white woman with white privilege. And again, I don't think that. Most of us think that, but I'm just saying, like, it doesn't have to make you delusional. And again, I'm just saying this for the purposes of a response, but most Black women in these spaces understand that the luxury aesthetic is a form of escapism. They understand that it's temporary. Most of us know that luxury images don't liberate anyone. People just use them to feel good. So if everyone else can have them, Black women can have them too. We are allowed variety and representation. The luxury aesthetic, it's not liberating Black women or the collective of Black people from racism, and that's okay, because to my knowledge, it's never been presented as that. And I agree that it should not be framed as a revolution, because it's not. But it does deserve to exist and just be what it is. And to us who endorse Black women in luxury, it is not limiting for us. Constantly focusing on dismantling every oppressive system is restrictive to us. You can't dictate what happiness is for us. You can't dictate what leisure is for us. So some of you detractors need to speak for yourselves. And something else I also think is important to note is that some of the main detractors of the Black woman in luxury aesthetic, some of them are Black women in luxury themselves, which would be fine if they weren't constantly outraging over the aesthetic. Many of them are talking big shit about social justice and activism while living luxury and probably spending most of their time not doing that shit. And they're engaging in materialism themselves. They enjoy and aspire to luxury just like the women over here. They just can't completely be honest about it because it's too contradictory to their politics and their platform. And look, we are all walking contradictions, but the issue with the detractors is they don't allow other Black women to be contradictory without calling them out. So why shouldn't they be called out for living a lie? And before any of you say it, no, intentionally indulging in luxury isn't simply quote unquote participating in capitalism to survive. Because that is what they like to say, and that is one of the biggest lies that these Black feminists are telling. The truth is that they too love luxury. They too love capitalism. They too are elitist, quiet as it's kept. When they get money, they luxuriate just like all of the rest of the Black women in luxury. It makes them happier in life just like it does for you. And many of them also participate in elitism and classism by bragging about their educational achievements. I was told by one of the Black women in luxury detractors that they were more accomplished than me, which, we all love a highly educated Black woman. But when you start coming for me or Black women in luxury spaces for being elitist and classist, when you're not willing to give up your place in the academic hierarchy in the name of elitism and classism, or you refuse to attack it as vigorously as you do our spaces, then I'm going to have to call you out. You can't get preachy with me about doing something when you're doing the same shit. Just like you are still buying luxury items despite the people making those items being exploited, the luxury movement ain't going to stop in the name of exploitation either. They doing what you do, sis. And it's so interesting to me how many of the detractors want the black women in luxury spaces to do what they aren't even willing to do. They want us to be better people than them, which is nuts. And they're saying women who adhere to the aesthetic are desperate for white validation. And if that's true, then what does that mean for you? You're not even able to curb your desire for white validation. So why are black women in luxury supposed to stop doing what you can't stop doing? Why are they supposed to stop wearing their long silky wigs if you can't even stop wearing them? And y'all know how I feel about those lace front wigs. I hate them, but it's the hypocrisy for me. You know what I'm saying? It's giving do as I say and not as I do. It's giving how some black men will talk black and sleep white. That's what it's giving. And if you're not living by what you say or what you preach at least a little bit, and you're still living in luxury, what is the point? I mean, really, at that point, you're just being fake righteous and complaining to hear yourself complain. One thing about us over here, honey, is that we don't do that fake morality stuff. We're upfront about what we engage in. We don't put on a mask of righteousness or speak politically correct and then intentionally go live a life that's opposite from that. I mean, there comes a point where it's just too much of a contradiction. And that's what I see here. And please don't accuse me of bullying people. If my detractors can critique corrective promotion, a term that I made popular in this space, and critique other topics that I frequently discuss in my sphere of influence, then I'm not a bully when I respond. Because I notice when the detractors and their followers call us out or publicly disagree with us, they like to play victim when we respond, even though for years it's been them criticizing us first. And they always like to say, oh, well, maybe they're responding like this because what they're doing isn't working like they thought it would. No, it actually is working. We're just tired of being harassed by you women for our decisions. Ever since black women started talking about embracing our femininity and practicing hypergamy and corrective promotion, and you see all these testimonials from women saying how it works and, you know, we've changed their lives, there has been a visceral response from a certain sector of black women. And ladies, we're allowed to defend ourselves from that because it's really, really getting out of hand, and it's a lot of projection going on. It's a lot of hysteria. And if they are allowed to have their opinions about us, we are allowed to respond, especially when they aren't willing to address their own contradictions and hypocrisy. And I'm sure now they'll make videos about being elitist because we're calling it out and it's simply an argument they cannot refute. But in general, it's not something they like to discuss. And they claim it's because they're more affected by black women in luxury. But I think it's more about them not wanting to give up the ways in which they benefit from classism. I think they're more comfortable with trying to dismantle black women in luxury because it's an aesthetic and an interest that they feel they can't fit into as easily as they can in academia. But see, that's not something they're ready to admit. And yes, I do think that them feeling left out causes them feelings of jealousy. They may not be jealous of the lifestyle because, again, some of these women are black women in luxury themselves. They do have access to the lifestyle, but they do seem to be envious when other women can live it more carefree than they can, or be more celebrated in luxury than they can. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that there is jealousy in that. And I don't think jealousy should be demonized. It's a normal emotion. And I think it's useful in this conversation for black women to acknowledge the ways in which they may be jealous or envious of other black women who can show up in ways that they may want to show up, but they feel plagued by their pro-black feminist politics. That's a conversation worth having because not many black women are willing to admit it. And something else I don't think these women are willing to admit is how some of them were influenced by the women in this space. It's possible to be influenced by people you don't like or you don't completely agree with their politics. I've had to admit that I was influenced by women that I don't like in these spaces. It is what it is. And I believe that we've seen that with certain detractors as well. And this is not to say that they switched completely and they weren't always feminine, but let's be honest, both their behavior and their dialogue shifted in a way that makes it appear that they were influenced by black women in the BWE spaces who have femininity and hypergamy platforms. And look, that is okay. I don't like when women are dishonest about them switching up their message or behavior because they were influenced by black women in BWE. We all have been to some extent. So why not just be honest? Or I don't know, maybe the influence is subconscious for them. I'm not sure. But we definitely see a difference that seems to be connected to BWE. That's all I'm saying. And since I am critiquing Black feminists, I want to reiterate that I feel feminists, their platforms, Black women who are activists, they are all necessary and they deserve care and support. And I don't remember any of the Black femininity and hypergamy spaces saying otherwise. Our point is that Black women consuming themselves in social justice 24/7, or the promotion of Black women doing that without self-prioritizing, without practicing self-care, is very harmful to them, especially when they are prioritizing the Black male plight over their own. And this is not to say that Black feminists don't say the same thing or didn't say it back in the day. I mean, it's because womanists like Alice Walker that I talk about colorism specific to dark-skinned women. So I'm definitely not saying they did not exist. But I think what some younger Black feminists don't want to acknowledge is how many of them still prioritize racism against Black men or Black people as a whole, as opposed to misogynoir and the Black woman's plight. And let's be honest, many of them most definitely don't get real about colorism like they should. And they do that because they are preoccupied constantly with being all-inclusive. They don't want to be called divisive. And they may call out Black men here and there, but ultimately they still cape for them when they're trying to be all-inclusive in their feminist theories and quest for liberation. So what happened was a lot of Black women, including Black feminists, they moved on to create or join BWE platforms because they felt their plight was more of a priority in those spaces. And also because they were getting more practical, real world advice and information that they could use individually, as opposed to being constantly bombarded with discussions about dismantling oppressive systems, something that likely will not ever happen in their lifetime. And listen, I am not saying that BWE is perfect or without flaws. I definitely have my gripes with some of the women in this space, and I've talked about it in several videos. There's definitely room for improvement, and I'm not saying that no Black feminists back then were giving practical advice or that they don't give it now. I'm not saying that they intentionally make Black women feel that their plight is on the back burner, but what I am saying is that many Black women in BWE very intentionally and consistently put the interests of Black women first. And that is why a lot of Black women are flocking to these spaces. That is why we feel more comfortable in spaces like this as opposed to yours. And saying how you refused to march for Black men 10 years ago in one article, that does not erase all of the caping you did for Black men before that and after. And if we're honest, most Black feminists and most Black feminist platforms have an overarching theme in their messaging that many times is self-sacrificing to Black women. And we're not going to pretend that one article of you saying you won't march for Black men cancels all of that out. And me personally, I am not trying to get rid of Black feminists or their platforms or their ideas. I'm not trying to minimize their work. I've said countless times that feminism and womanism is why I'm able to do what I do today. So I think it's very valuable, but I'm allowed to address the parts in the movement that are specifically harmful to Black women in the way that it encourages Black women to overwork themselves and exhaust themselves in the name of social justice, and for groups that provide little to no reciprocity. And saying that doesn't mean that I hate feminism or I hate feminists. Black feminism may have very well built the foundation for BWE. I'll give you that. You go, girls. But that doesn't mean that you've always prioritized the Black woman's plight effectively. It doesn't mean that you've never slipped in coddling and caping for Black men. Let's be honest. If you didn't, there would have never been a need for BWE spaces and they wouldn't be popular today. And I think that's something some of you guys need to come to terms with, just like we have to come to terms with where we fall short in BWE. So that concludes this podcast style video. Let me know what you think about this format. Let me know what other topics you would like me to discuss down in the comment section, and I'll catch up with you in the next one.